first thing I want to get into, it's not necessarily on this topic in particular, but in the ongoing vein of kind of looking at something different for each video of this thing, too, in addition to just the areas, easy mode in the Souls series. Something I keep seeing coming up, and I don't know, I figured an early area might be a good time to talk about this. So, what are your thoughts for an easy mode in the Souls series?
Tell me, Mr. Crowbar, would you play Amnesia without the lantern? Or would you play classic Resident Evil if there were not a finite amount of supplies? I mean, in the way that other games are stitched together by very focused, potent design elements, the difficulty is what ties together the Souls games. And this is the best example I can think of, especially because it is part of Dark Souls. If you are high level, good gear, you beat Dark Souls 1, you go to New Game Plus, the first third to first half of the game is not yet on the tier of the level that the main character is. You breeze past everything, and it's a pushover, and it's satisfying in a regard, but it's also kind of boring. Like, once you get to Anne Orlando, things kind of even out a bit, and the difficulty catches up with you. But that's the best way I can cite it. Play the first half of Dark Souls on New Game Plus with a pretty well-developed character, and that's why I don't think easy mode belongs in a Souls game. The games are not unreasonably difficult as is, and the games are... Dark Souls is far greater than the sum of its parts, and each individual component doesn't really stand on its own. It needs the difficulty to give it weight and balance. So, no easy mode. No easy mode.
I pretty much agree with that, almost entirely, because what you see almost everybody propose, at least, is just doing a percentage-based easy mode, where, you know, you deal some percentage more of damage and enemies take some percentage less of damage before they get killed. And I would go so far as to argue that if you think the Souls series is hard as of now and you could not play it without that easy mode, that's not going to make it easier for you. I think it would still... What is challenging about the series is more so learning how to play it, and I don't really think just a raw stat reduction would actually make it easy enough to count as being easier.
I kind of agree with that as well. I think that just adjusting enemy HP and damage values is a really lazy way to do it. And yeah, I mean, there are other elements of the game that's kind of transcend simple damage values, like instant death traps or other things like that, or status effects, things that
Exactly.
I mean, are you going to change the level design to accommodate an easier mode? If you are going to design the game with an easy mode in mind, how is it going to affect the normal mode? Even if you go under with the assumption that people who want to play the standard Souls game don't have to be affected by it, they will. They absolutely will. The game is going to be changed, probably adversely, in some form that's going to affect everyone. And even if in some ideal world you could play a Dark Souls game with an easy mode and the purity of a standard mode was left totally untouched, which again I don't think is possible. I don't think. I mean, I hate to speak and be condescending here, but I don't think it's fair for FromSoft to marginalize the purpose of the game series to make it appeal to people who obviously don't care about what the game is about anyway.
Yeah, these games are complex and they are unforgiving, but I still don't really think they're super hard, and I think their difficulty is more of the marketing and the reputation behind them. And I would say, to construct my psych profile for the potential Dark Souls fan who thinks the games are probably too hard, I would say those people generally probably haven't played the games and just think it's hard because of the reputation behind it. And that if they did actually sit down and play it and get into it, they would find it really isn't that bad.
Yeah, exactly. I have many an anecdote from, meeting friends, folks who would see the background on my phone and be like, oh, what's that? And I'm like, oh, well, let me tell you about one of the greatest,
let me proselytize
exactly.
for you.
Or how I hear an employee in a GameStop recommending Dark Souls or Demon Souls, and the first thing the customer says is, oh, but man, isn't that like the hardest game ever? And it's like, oh, Jesus, no, it's not. It's not. The game just expects you to play smart. Play smart and you can finish it. Anyone can finish it. DSP finished Dark Souls 1. You don't have an excuse. You don't need an easy mode. If DSP can finish your game, you are insulting yourself by asking for an easy mode. So, there you go.
I do think there is room to make the Souls series a bit more inclusionary without compromising the difficulty or the design, and I think you could do things that would work for new players without dramatically changing the rest of the game. Like, I think there could be more of an open tutorial system that maybe explains a few of the less obvious mechanics, like weapon scaling and things like that, which aren't necessarily clear despite how important they are. I think there are still, and there are other ways, making NPC phantoms more available. That's a way you could make it easier without actually changing the gameplay for people who don't want it to be changed. And I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to some changes like that. I might even welcome some of them, because if you're doing like a specialized build, it could be nice to have a couple of little crutch things if you had to rely on them to get to the point where your character was actually decent enough to like get by on their own. But yeah, so I think it maybe could be more inclusionary, but I don't think an easy mode is the way to go about it at all.
I half agree with your inclusionary argument. I think the desperation that comes along with a poorly built character is, how do I put it? It's kind of the equivalent of struggling through a survival horror game when you're on your last clip of ammunition. And Dark Souls 2 kind of has finite resources because of the enemies that stop spawning, and oh god, we have to talk about that eventually.
Yeah.
But I think that even though the game doesn't explain it, it's arguably not totally the player's fault if they build a bad character, if they don't really know what they're doing. But I think in this regard, it doesn't make the game unwinnable. My first playthrough of Dark Souls 1, mind you, I hadn't played Demon Souls that much. I had a grasp of the controls and, basically how to play. But I had no idea how smithing worked. I had no idea how to make a weapon or to get a weapon that would go well with my character. I didn't even know what kind of character I was making, really. So I was just kind of like, trudging along through the game, and it was still very winnable. And even though I played through about 40 to 50%, pretty much to Anor Londo and Sen's Fortress with this very half-realized character, I was still able to turn things around and still, my first playthrough with this shitty build, I was able to finish the game with. I was able to turn it around. And I think that a lot of this goes to the fact that a lot of the Souls stuff is meant to encourage outside communication beyond the game. I mean, just the messages alone are just... It's meant to incentivize communication between players. So I think that making it more inclusionary to help explain things a little bit better, I think Dark Souls 2 already does that a fair bit more than Dark Souls 1 in some good ways, namely with the Covenants. I mean, you find a Covenant, it explains to you what it's all about. I think that's important. A lot of the other mechanics, I mean, you have weapons with, raw stat values next to them, and now in Dark Souls 2, you can press a button and you can highlight anything on an interface and it'll tell you exactly what it means. So the information is definitely there. I don't really think there's anything in the game that needs more obvious explanations. And if someone, doesn't pay attention or they overlook something and they screw up and their character suffers for it, I think that's a valid punishment. Whether or not that's fair is another, that's a different thing for discussion. Yeah. But I think that kind of risk and the possibility of that happening, I think it should be in the game. I think that a game that relies on the kind of weight and difficulty that Dark Souls does, it can't be entirely fair. The Anor Londo archers are arguably not entirely fair, but the game is much better with them included, I would say. So I think that having those, those bullshitty aspects, things that can harm the player beyond their reasonable knowledge, I think is still important. And I don't think it's cruel enough to the point that it damages the game, because, like I said, I was able to bounce back on my first playthrough with a pretty poorly built character, so even if you mess up,
I would agree with a lot of that. And if I had to make a concession, I think there are ways that you could do it without changing the core gameplay that much. To the point where I would actually say too, and this is going off my point earlier about how people just don't play it and they think it's unreasonably hard, is that if they found some way to advertise that they had an easy mode but didn't actually put something that actually resembled an easy mode in, people would probably just accept that, like, off of a placebo effect kind of a thing. You know, it's like, obviously I'm not saying, like, I advertise on the back of the box that you've got an easy mode and then not include one, but you could advertise that, oh, this game is going to be a lot more inclusive to new players, which is something they did with Dark Souls 2, and then you just pretty much make the same game, and I think the idea of the game being easier would be enough to get people interested that might think it's too hard, even if it wasn't actually easier.
That makes a good amount of sense. I think that maybe rather than, you know, concessioning the game in terms of making its mechanics more obvious, or, God forbid, an easy mode, no thank you, I think the best course of action would be to simply increase the number of options the player has, and maybe make things a little less binary. For example, in Dark Souls 2, you can be invaded whenever. You now have like a deteriorating hollow mode, but you can still only summon when you're fully human. Maybe allowing you to summon shades, at least, until you hit a certain hollow threshold would be nice, so that players, if they never played the game before, they have a little bit of a safety net, so they have access to more resources more often. And you know, more skilled players can just ignore that. I think a lot of players make it a thing to not summon on their first playthrough, and fortunately there's a covenant in Dark Souls 2 built specifically for that. I actually like that in Dark Souls 2, instead of adding an easy mode, they basically added a hard mode right from the beginning of the game, which was great. So,
if the Covenant of the Meek actually worked a bit better, that could probably be considered easy mode, but it's a little iffy on how often you actually get to summon people.
That's true. It's a shame. That's one of the most interesting Covenant concepts in Dark Souls 2, and I haven't tried it, but I've heard it's just not functional, basically.
I think options would definitely be the way to go, and that's what I'd argue. I've talked with some people and done like really in-depth systems about stuff about how I think if you had a way to sort of do a risk-reward thing for a summon, like if there was some kind of like mercenary covenant that you could like hire NPCs off of a summon, so it's like, okay, you can get an NPC summon wherever you want in the game, but it's going to cost you, 50% of your souls while they're summoned. So if you desperately need somebody to get through, you can get somebody if you want, but there's still a penalty for doing so. But there's a lot of things they could attempt, and I would also say definitely a part of making these games quote-unquote easier is not having, like, bullshit mechanics, sort of like World Tendency, which are totally confusing and don't really make a lot of sense.
I would agree. World Tendency, I can see what they were going for, and I think it's kind of neat in the respect that if you don't, it allows you to see new things on each playthrough. Like, Demon Souls is kind of neat because with that game especially, with the tendency makes it so that you basically have to finish the game a couple times to see new events and see new characters and get new things, which is pretty cool. But it is really confusing, and mainly the methods in which you influence the world tendency is complete nonsense.
Yeah, that is what I would say is complete. Like, I would doubt that there is a single person who has seen every world tendency events that did not have to look up something.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think it's possible. Even if you do grasp it, like even if you do understand on your own how to do world tendency, some of the stipulations on how to get to certain events at certain points in the game is like, it's like trying to 100% a Tails game. Like, you basically have to play with a strike on your lap, because if you move five steps forward too far, then you've just like locked off a side quest that would unlock 20 more side quests or something. So.
Yeah, God, what is it? No, Vesperia probably has the worst missable side quest ever.
Oh my God.
Which is
Which one?
What was that?
Which one are you talking about?
Getting Judith's ultimate weapon, which is like an 11-part quest that starts before you ever meet her, because you have to like talk to some random NPC in like the second town of the game.
Oh my God.
Who like then moves to a different town where you can talk to him and he gives you a hint about where to go in the future. So you start at like hour 2 and you get the spear like hour 50.
That's so dumb. I know that I don't even know if this affects anything, but I know that you can have philosophical discussions in different towns with the villain of the game before he's ever revealed as the villain, which is like half cool, half complete. What?
Yeah, no, that's one of them. In the same town as where you do that quest, he's like standing on top of a wall and makes like a bunch of cryptic comments if you go talk to him. And it's like, oh, I wonder who this obviously important NPC is standing here. Like, clearly this isn't just some dude in town.
Man, if there was ever a game with fucking bullshit design and a story that suffered for it, it was Tales of Vesperia. Oh, God, anyway. Unfortunately, this is not a Tales of Vesperia podcast, so...
And as an actor, and I actually did look up some of his stuff too, he has a pretty weird like voice acting history too. It's one of those things, I'm kind of a voice actor nerd, and I love reading like the laundry list of stuff people are in. He's one of the guys in the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer. Oh
my God, you're right.
Yeah.
Oh, how did I not notice that? Oh,
he was the voice, and he was the voice and like not the fight guy, but the character, for as much as he was in the movie, of Darth Maul.
What?
Yeah. Peter Serofinodoodle was Darth Maul. In episode 1. Ray Park is the stunt guy who I think was actually him for like 90% of the movie, because all Darth Maul did was fight, but Peter was the voice actor.
Wow. Interesting.
For the 10 words that Darth Maul said.
I don't remember any dialogue he had.
Huh. And then coincidentally too, in South Park, he was Darth Chef.
Oh my God.
And then, of course, a bunch of, like, random British comedies, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. That's my voice acting nerd note of this video.
I looked up some of the VAs for Dark Souls 2. The first game. I don't think most of them didn't have very striking history.
Yeah, no, it's surprising. This series, it doesn't really use big-name voice actors, but they usually get pretty good performances.
Oh, absolutely. The voice acting in the Souls games is great. And Solaire's voice actor actually played, I think, on the longest-running like TV cop drama in history, or in the UK or something. Like, I don't know like on what duration that actor was on it, but like this guy had a pretty substantial role, I think, in a very iconic TV series, which I thought was pretty interesting. So,
and no, I would say probably one of my favorite, like probably my favorite voice in the whole series is Sage Frank. I love his voice actor, and I remember him looking up, and I think he's done like a couple other things, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I love like magic using characters and mages and wizards in games and stuff, and that's what I can always be if magic is balanced well. And I thought he nailed the wizened old wizard guy.
I think, man, favorite VA, that is tough. I am probably going to say Oswald or Lautrec.
Lautrec's definitely up there. Lautrec is so perfect for his character.
Yeah, Lautrec is great, but I'm biased towards Oswald, and I think that every line of his is total gold, so...
Just Oswald the Troll.
Yeah, man. Oh, by the way, off topic, but I saw someone draw fan art of their various Fashion Souls builds, and they were wearing the partner set without the robes. Man, it's like a gimp suit. And I put it on my character in Dark Souls 2, and it basically is. Anyway, sorry. We were talking NPCs, and that was Pate, so...
yeah, that was Pate. We really like Pate, apparently, so...
Yeah.
Pate's a cool dude. We'll talk about him more later, because he shows up a bunch. This particular fight it's very well designed, definitely. You pretty much said most of the positive stuff I wanted to say about it, so I guess I'll be devil's advocate. God, I wish you could get his armor. Like, why is that not a thing?
I've seen that complaint before, and you get much less practical armor, like the smelter armor, which looks terrible on a player. I don't know why you can't get the Pursuer armor. Granted, I don't really care for the Pursuer armor visually like a lot of other people do, but it is very puzzling. Yeah, I don't know what's
It
up
was
with
because
that.
it's one of those. If you're going to give us boss armor, that seems like a very logical enemy to give us the boss armor.
Yeah, the only thing I can maybe come up with is the fact that maybe the armor. Well, I don't know, because some of the armor is
It's
like
kind of weirdly proportioned.
It is weirdly
admittedly.
proportioned, but usually when they give you boss armor, it's not the same model as what's on the boss.
A lot of the time, I think it is. Like I know, because like I don't know how much in this game. I guess I need to compare some stuff. Like I know, the original Dark Souls, they ran into problems of that because like Go's armor looked like shit.
Or like Ornstein's
On the
armor
player.
didn't have the tassel, which was criminal.
Yeah.
Or I think there was a tassel on Artorias' armor, but it didn't have physics.
Yeah, but it didn't have physics applied to it.
So yeah, I think that. But like if you look at Lucatiel's armor compared to what she wears on her character model, it's a different model.
Because
so I think
I know, cause, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess Dark Souls 2 might be different because I know in Dark Souls 1, I think a lot of the boss armor was just resized from their actual bosses. Like, because I know, like, you get weird stuff like the weird skinny little Artorias legs, which are like skinnier than the player's legs actually are.
Which was I think I like that design touch. I think it's cool looking. So.
It's because it's one of those. It works on the larger model, but not the smaller player character kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, if you liked that, you might want to check out our crit play for Resident Evil 4. It's not with Kai, but it's the same format, so if you liked how this video worked, you might like that one too. And if you like Dark Souls, we have a full LP for the original Dark Souls, which my friend goes into playing blind, and I kind of guide him through it. And we also have an ongoing LP for Dark Souls 2. Kai also runs a few Dark Souls related things online, and I've tossed some links in the description of this video where you can check out his stuff.